It all began here at the time of the French Revolution with the ancestor of the Chibret family. He was a farrier in this village, which is overlooked by the extinct volcano of Puy-Marie. He knew nothing about the wider world and lived reclusively in this inaccessible part of the country, which often became snowed in during the winter. His descendants would go on to leave this harsh life behind and move to the city. His two grandsons in particular, who were gifted at school, would soon start scientific studies. The youngest, Jean, would become the first pharmacist in the family. He is the first to open a dispensary in Clermont-Ferrand.
Hélas, ce jeune frère va décéder à la trentaine, laissant un orphelin, mon grand-père, qui fondera plus tard les laboratoires Chibret.
There was also an older brother, Paul, who will one day take this orphan under his wing. But for now, Paul wants to become a doctor. This is good timing, as Napoleon III, who lacked white coats in his army, is offering tuition at his new Imperial School of the Military Health Service in Strasbourg. After 4 years at this institution, which will educate 5 Nobel Prize winners, Paul takes up his first post in Algeria. It was there, on an evening in June 1871, that he felt a pain in his eyes, this being the first sign of iridochoroiditis that would leave him blind. Paul was repatriated to Paris, and he promised himself that if he regained his sight, he would devote himself to ophthalmology.
Paris, à l'époque, compte peu d'ophtalmologistes et la plupart sont des étrangers.
He received treatment from these ophthalmologists and not at the faculty, and he also learned about ocular medicine. Paul, the young man from Auvergne, was taught by Galezowski, a Pole, and De Vicker, a German.
Une fois formé, Paul rentre en Auvergne et deviendra le premier et le seul ophtalmologiste de la région.
In the mornings, he would treat the working classes at the Hôtel Dieu in Clermont-Ferrand, and in the afternoons, he would receive his private patients. He was a pioneer with a particular interest in antiseptics for ocular surgery in the treatment of tear ducts and the meibomian glands. He becomes one of the specialists in trachoma, but he does not forget optics and optometry. In his spare time, he was also an inventor and has multiple devices for auscultation and surgical instruments manufactured. Despite living in the provinces, he remained in contact with his teachers. We are now at the end of the 19th century, at a time when science reigns supreme and which sees the birth of the first international conferences. Dr. Paul Chibret becomes one of these traveling scholars who traversed Europe from Berlin to Copenhagen and from Amsterdam to Moscow. This led him to issue a call in the Revue d'Oculistique for the creation of French-language Society of Ophthalmology.
Il frappe à toutes les portes et parvient à mettre autour d'une table tous ses confrères de renom, qu'ils soient universitaires ou libéraux.
This is how, on 29th January 1883, in the old Abbey Palace of Saint-Germain-des-Prés, the French Society of Ophthalmology was created. We are now at the dawn of the 20th century. Henry Chibret, the orphan nephew taken in by Paul, has grown up, and with Paul's blessing, he opens a pharmacy in Clermont-Ferrand and simultaneously creates Laboratoire Chibret.
Nous sommes en 1902, Henri a 26 ans.
Uncle Paul and his nephew Henry, the doctor and the pharmacist, are passionate about therapeutic innovation. Together, they develop treatments, essentially based on alkaloids or mineral salts in the form of ointments that are less prone to contamination. Henry also has the idea of creating dry eye drops consisting of a powder to be mixed with boiled water before use. War breaks out. Henry leaves for Verdun, where he will see the horrors of the trenches as a pharmacist in a hospital on the front line. 1 year before this, his son Jean is born.
Bien sûr, le destin de Jean est tout tracé. Il devra reprendre le laboratoire paternel.
He studies pharmacy in Clermont-Ferrand when he meets Marguerite, who would later become his wife and who took the same course. Unfortunately, having barely graduated and just returned from his honeymoon, he is mobilized for the Second World War. He is taken prisoner on the front, and it is during captivity that he learns of the birth of his eldest son, who is named Henry after his grandfather. Ultimately, he is liberated and returns to Clermont-Ferrand, where he takes charge of the family laboratory. It is in Switzerland, and especially in the United States, where new treatments are emerging, and in particular, the famous antibiotics, which are being produced industrially as part of the American war effort to treat the GIs on the battlefield.
En France, ces antibiotiques vont être très convoités et mon père va réussir à se procurer de la pénicilline et être le premier à lancer des collyres et des pommades oculaires antibiotiques dont le succès sera immédiat.
Jean Chibret clearly understood that pharmaceutical innovation was coming mainly from the United States, and in 1947, Jean left to discover the large American firms, notably Merck. Their site is a real gateway to knowledge and innovation. There, Jean, the man from Auvergne, becomes convinced that research and development must become the spearhead of the expansion of Laboratoire Chibret. After visiting the Merck library, he decides to create the world's largest documentation center for eye health back in Clermont-Ferrand. Everything published on the subject is analyzed and recorded. A scientific journal, the Revue Chibret, is even distributed in tens of thousands of copies. Finally, around 100 films are made with the big names in the discipline, constituting the largest film library in the world dedicated to ophthalmology.
Parallèlement, la gamme Chibret va s'étoffer, et notamment avec l'arrivée des corticoïdes de Merck, qui représentent une avancée considérable dans le traitement des maladies oculaires.
Furthermore, John is the first to have the idea of adding preservatives to his solutions and to introduce a use-by date for bottles that have been opened. These are major innovations. He also builds the most modern ophthalmology factory in Europe in Clermont-Ferrand.
Dans ce contexte, les laboratoires Chibret vivent un paradoxe. Ils n'ont jamais été aussi créatifs en termes de recherche. Et pourtant, mon père se rend compte qu'il ne pourra pas développer le laboratoire comme il convient, notamment en raison du prix des collyres en France, qui sont les plus bas du monde. Le géant Merck va proposer une alliance à mon père. Et c'est ainsi que notre entreprise, déjà leader en Europe de l'Ouest, au Moyen-Orient et dans une partie de l'Afrique, va pouvoir devenir le numéro 1 mondial de l'ophtalmologie. Cela dit, la famille va vendre l'entreprise. Les Chibret sont des créateurs. Ils ne sont pas faits pour prospérer au sein d'une multinationale.
Of course, the fourth generation worked in their father's company, then at MSD Chibret, but then each one will make their own way in the world. Françoise, the youngest, opens an art gallery in Paris. As for Jacques, the youngest son, he creates Biophysic Medical by initially developing an automated electrophysiology device, then a range of ocular ultrasound machines developed by Dr. Pujol.
Et surtout, grâce au professeur Jean Haut, il va lancer les premiers lasers européens à argon, puis avec le professeur Aaron Rosa, il va lancer le premier laser YAG au monde pour le traitement des cataractes secondaires.
His machines, manufactured in Clermont-Ferrand, are sold worldwide. His company goes on to become the world's #1 in the field of ophthalmic ultrasound and #2 in the field of lasers. Jacques is the first Chibret to establish a subsidiary in the United States. In 1989, he worked on the eczema laser for corneal refractive surgery. But then it is a dark year for the Chibret family, and they lose Jacques and Jean, the son and the father, within a few days of each other.
Je me retrouve seul à continuer l'aventure familiale. À cette époque, je m'occupe depuis 10 ans de Transfito, la première start-up pharmaceutique française qui développe des innovations dont elle va confier la production et la commercialisation à des grands groupes.
To meet this challenge, Transfito has a few strengths and has just established itself thanks to the development of Naga for the treatment of ocular allergies. But this company has also just developed the first gel for dry eye, as well as another gel for ocular herpes.
Cela dit, Transfito, à mes yeux, est trop dépendant des laboratoires auxquels il a confié ses découvertes. Il faut se souvenir qu'à l'époque, le secteur pharmaceutique subit de vastes bouleversements et des centaines de laboratoires vont disparaître. Et avec le jeu des fusions-acquisitions, nos médicaments passent de main en main et sont parfois oubliés par les équipes qui sont censées les commercialiser.
As a result, in 1994, he decides to transform this startup into a real pharmaceutical company, meaning a company that develops, manufactures, and sells its own products, and which will be in direct contact with ophthalmologists. It will be called Théa. In Greek, this means vision.
Pour assurer son lancement, je dispose de plusieurs médicaments développés par Transfito et dont j'ai pu récupérer les droits.
Above all, he is counting on a breakthrough innovation. It will be ABAC, the world's first multi-dose packaging that delivers preservative-free eye drops. In a nod to history, with this invention, he eliminates the use of preservatives that his father had introduced after the war.
Théa devient d'emblée le pionnier et le leader mondial des produits sans conservateur. Et tout son développement va se baser, comme toujours chez les Chibret, sur la priorité absolue donnée à l'innovation.
It was in the first years of this expansion that the fifth generation would emerge. Henry clearly knew little about his brother Jacques' son when he suggests for him to just dip his feet in the water.
Après 2 ans dans la filiale à Barcelone, Jean-Frédéric revient à Clermont-Ferrand et il va ouvrir de nouvelles filiales en Europe, au Maghreb, au Moyen-Orient, en Amérique latine, au Canada. Mais aussi, et c'est une gageure, 40 ans après son père, il ouvre une implantation aux États-Unis.
He does all this while maintaining a financial balance between research and internationalization, and also as president of Laboratoire Théa, as Henry had handed this over to him in 2008. Théa Research has gone on to generate innovations each and every year in most therapeutic classes and to offer practitioners and their patients one of the most comprehensive and modern ranges in ophthalmology. Jean-Frédéric has stepped up the research effort to find the treatments of tomorrow, in particular by opening Théa to outside ideas from universities, biotech, ophthalmologists and startups, all through its new structure, Théa Open Innovation. In the end, the apple never falls far from the tree. Jean-Frédéric is continuing the family tradition, and the Théa Foundation, which he launched in 2012, is training staff in eye health and in the fight against trachoma in French-speaking and Portuguese-speaking Africa. 2 subjects that had fascinated Dr. Paul Chibret in the 19th century.
Démarrée il y a plus de 150 ans, cette histoire familiale se poursuit et j'espère se poursuivra pour longtemps.